I've had a lot of comments recently about my containers and my window boxes, the flowers in the garden. What do I do? Do I have any tips? What am I using for fertilizer? How do I plant them up when I first plant up a container? So I thought I would just walk you through what I do here in my garden, and hopefully this will give you some tips, tricks on what you can do to have beautiful containers. So let's get going today. Now, the first thing we're going to start with is what I do when I actually plant up a container. So the first thing that I use is a potting mix that has fertilizer added to it. So the one I go to, and none of these are sponsored today. None of the things I'm talking about is sponsored. The Miracle-Gro potting mix with fertilizer. I've added that potting mix already to our container. I'm gonna go ahead and plant one up today just to show you, because if you're a visual person like me, it helps to see what I'm actually doing. So we are also going to add Organic Biotone by Espoma. Now this just helps the roots of the plant, it gets them going. So I like to add a little bit of this into the container. So I just dump in a little bit, and let me show you here. And that is in a pellet form, and then there's just a little bit in there. Finally, for an extra boost, so we have our potting mix in there with the fertilizer that's mixed in. We have our biotone, which is a fertilizer that helps those little roots get started. Now this is Miracle-Gro slow release pellets. Now any type of fertilizer that's a slow release pellet is going to work. So whatever is handy for you in your area, those are the three things that we would want to put in our container to make our annuals beautiful from the get-go. So in this case, there are instructions on the back, but for this size of a pot, I'm going to put in 1 to 2 tablespoons, and I just shake some in. And that food is good for about 6 to 8 weeks. But you can see here. So we're going to mix all those together. The containers that I planted, let's say in May at the beginning of the season, because our last frost date is usually around the first part of May, end of April. Those containers were planted up like I just showed you. Well, by now we're already way into summer. So closer to the end of June, I went around to all my containers and I added some more slow release pellets. So you just add those in on the top of the soil. Then every time you water, that's going to give off a little bit of food for your annuals to keep them healthy. Another thing that you can also do is, and I don't get to it weekly, but you can do it weekly, is have a water-soluble fertilizer. And I have the Miracle-Gro all plant food. Now, if you just have a few containers, this comes, you get multiple packs like this in this big box. You can open this and it comes with its own little scoop in the box, instructions on the container of how much to use, but you can add a little bit of this into your watering can and just water your containers if you have a few. But this can also work for your plants, your annuals, and your perennials that are out in your garden if you want to give them some water-soluble fertilizer. So the option that I choose that I think is easier is this is sold separately from Miracle-Gro, and it hooks to the end of your garden hose. So you open one of these pre-measured packets, you pour it into your container, you screw this back on, and it's got all that blue fertilizer in it, and then you just hook it to the end of your hose and it'll fill up and feed your plants. So you'll go around then and you can water your plants and feed them at the same time. And this works really well if you have lots of containers, or in my case, I do both the containers and I will do some of the plants that are out in the garden in the ground. And that gives your plants an added bonus throughout the summer for extra food. Now, like I said, this is something you can do weekly. In my case, I have only got it done twice this season. So the plants that you see now have had all the things I've already shared with you, plus 2 applications of this. Now on the hydrangeas, if I'm going to plant a hydrangea, I am also going to dig my hole, put the biotone in for the hydrangea, throw in a little cup full of compost into the hole. Then I'm going to add some hollytone. Now for hydrangeas, you can add the hollytone when you first plant it. And so I like the Espoma hollytone. This is also what I feed the hydrangeas with. First thing in the spring, when they start leafing out, they get some of this. I also feed them again later in the summer and again earlier in late summer, early fall. So they will get 2 to 3 applications of fertilizer. So most importantly is water, water, water. Make sure that you're hydrating all of your plants, not only in your containers, but also in the ground. You don't want to overwater, but you don't want to underwater. So that can be an easy check of in a container, just pulling that plant back. Look at that dirt. Is that dirt, that potting mix, is it dry? You can even put your finger down in there if you don't have a water tester, a gauge tester to see how wet your pot is. And you can tell by putting your finger in there, does it feel wet or is it dry? You can also tell when your flower talks to you and is all droopy. That means it needs some water usually. But a lot of my containers are proven winners. Now again, like I said, none of this is sponsored today. This has just been my own experience. I do have other brands in my containers, but 99% of my containers are proven winners flowers because in my experience, they just do so much better in my area than any other brands that I've tried. That I really like the Supertunias. This year we are doing the bubblegum, the paradise, and the silverberry combination. And the Supertunias just are awesome and give you lots and lots of color. Okay, so let's recap then. What do I use for when I'm potting up a plant in a container? I'm going to use a potting mix with fertilizer in it. I'm going to use Espoma biotone to help with the roots. I'm going to add some slow release fertilizer pellets to the mix, combine all 3 of those, and then plant that pot up for a beautiful container. And then how am I going to care for it during the summer? After a few weeks' time, I'm going to add some more slow release pellets to the potting soil mix. And every time I water, then it's going to get a little bit of food. I can also take my water-soluble fertilizer and add that every week and give them a good dose of water-soluble fertilizer. And you can do that either in a watering can or in a larger application, up to you. Now when I'm planting hydrangeas out in the garden, what am I going to put in my hydrangeas? I'm going to, after I dig that hole to plant up that hydrangea out in the garden, I'm going to add some compost because I deal with clay soil. So this is the organic compost. I'm going to add biotone to give those roots a start. And for hydrangeas, I'm also going to add some hollytone, and then I'm going to treat that hydrangea a couple more times in the season with hollytone to give them a nice fertilizer feed.